Excellent. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to today's W12 Exchange, Mobilizing Private Finance for Urban Water Projects Globally. My name's Ellie Leaning, and I'm the project lead for the W12 programs. We've had a busy few months conducting research and designing the W12 protocol, an online platform designed to share solutions to urban water projects or issues that can be adapted, scaled, and replicated globally. In our last online event in May, panelists talked about how to build back better post-COVID-19 and how to shift from crisis management to sustainable development in its truest sense. We learned that $1 spent in water yields $4 plus in benefits. We learned that water is both a metaphor and a mechanism for human opportunity and ecological well-being. We learned that multilateral organizations are restructuring their approaches to PPPs, and new players in private equity are emerging, like the International Water Bank that recently launched in Amsterdam. It is agreed that water is a human right, but it is also a resource that has associated costs to manage and monitor. Our conversation today is about innovative finance and new paradigms of partnerships to achieve clean, safe, and affordable water for all, with a particular focus in urban settings. Cities are faced with water-related challenges now more than ever before. Today, our focus is on partnerships that combine incentives and feedback mechanisms of markets with the ethos and commitment of philanthropy and the enabling environments of governments, all to help cities provide water to all, particularly the most vulnerable. This is the first of a series of events that pilot new ways of convening post-COVID-19. As a movement that exists to bring diverse stakeholders together to catalyze solutions and partnerships, W12 relies on bringing people together. But in the era of COVID-19, we've had to get creative with virtual meetings. Stay on to the end of this session for an exciting announcement about our upcoming hybrid event. Today's panel will be moderated by Philip Clayton, the president of the Institute for Ecological Civilization, one of the two organizing partners of W12 programs, along with the South African-based nonprofit Save Our Schools. This session will be recorded and left up on this YouTube page. We'll have 10 minutes for questions at the end. Please feel free to use the chat box on YouTube or on Facebook, or submit questions by tweeting at us with the hashtag W12 Exchanges. I'll now hand it over to Philip to begin.
Thank you, Ellie, and welcome to the several hundred people who are joining this event from around the world today. We have an amazing group of panelists with, between them, decades and decades of experience in the water sector. I'll be brief with the introductions because the main goal is to feature the experts that we have on today's panel. With us today are HP Nanda, Global Vice President and General Manager of DuPont Water Solutions, which is dedicated to solving water challenges for industrial, residential, and wastewater. HP supervises some 1,800 employees, 8 manufacturing sites, 9 technology centers, and as you know, DuPont is present in most of the central countries around the world. He started his career with DuPont in India in 1998 and has worked in virtually every aspect of the business, sales, marketing, supply chain, strategy, innovation, and business management, living in multiple countries through the years. Next, it's my pleasure to welcome Joe Vasey, who is Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at Xylem, supervising some 17,000 employees. Joe is responsible for the company's marketing function, building the Xylem brand by focusing on the diverse needs of different customers in particular areas of the industry, expanding their digital marketing capacities, account management capacities. He also serves as the chair of Watermark, which is Xylem's corporate citizenship and social investment program. They work on providing safe water resources for communities around the world and in educating people about water issues, engaging volunteers inside and outside of the company. Next, it's my pleasure to welcome Ms. Catherine Kaufman from Nedbank CIB. She is Head of Infrastructure, Telecommunications, and Water at Nedbank Limited. She's worked to develop and monitor their strategic business unit plans in these fields, generating new investment opportunities in both public and private sectors in South Africa and across the rest of the African continent. Her background is as an attorney, working with commercial and financial services, and over 19 years of experience in these fields. Fourth, I welcome Nico Saporidi, who is Senior Investment Officer in the Transaction and PPP Advisory Group of the International Finance Corporation. He's the unit's global specialist for the water and hydropower sectors. He focuses on municipal services, water, wastewater and waste, irrigation, PPP projects, hydropower, and he says he works occasionally to privatize an occasional airport or two. He comes with background in Siemens, project ventures in Germany, Enel in Italy, Sauer and Bywater in the UK, and in South Africa. And like most of our participants, he holds a number of degrees. And finally, we welcome Saif Tenzim Qayyum, who is the lead coordinator for Bangladesh and Vietnam programs. He works with the 2030 Water Resources Group of the World Bank Group. And he focuses especially in municipal wastewater questions. He's had worked with some amazing projects recently on public-private partnerships. He's also an operations officer with the International Finance Corporation. He's currently located in Boston, finishing work at Harvard Kennedy School and doing some teaching there as well. Thank you, all of you, for being present. I'm going to dive directly into our first question. In order to set the context for the positive brainstorming that we'll do together as a panel, we need to talk first about the difficulties that financing urban water projects has faced in the past. What are some of the key issues that you recognize that have made the financing so difficult? And where should the interventions focus? So if you can give us just a sense in a minute or two of the challenge we face, then for the rest of the time, we'll look at the sorts of innovations that you are aware of or work with. Let's move in the same direction that I just did the introduction. So HP, could I ask you to launch us off?
Thank you, Philip, and all my panelists today. Just glad to be here. And I think discussing about the financing challenges for urban projects is always interesting. It is more interesting now because of the COVID-19 and the global economy that we are experiencing around the world. But this is a global problem, but we need to find local solutions because water is always local. And I think solving a problem always needs a framework. So with my little mind I wanted to think about solving this like using a 2x2 matrix as a framework. You can think about maybe the horizontal axis is like the economic development of a country or the per capita income of the country or the credit rating of the country. The more developed the country is, it is towards the right-hand side of the horizontal axis. And the vertical axis, you can think about more like the bankability, the feasibility, the credit rating of a particular water project. If it is high, which means the country is pretty good economically and the project is very good, financing of that will not be a problem because many of those projects will be in developed economies of the world. And you can think about the global economy where we have zero interest rates, negative interest rates, or very low interest rates. In many economies, it's not a challenge. If it is high on the country's economic development, but low on the credibility or the bankability of a project, it is a project-specific problem. It could be that the project does not have economic feasibility, it does not have the scale, or the whole municipality or the city has financing challenges of itself. So it requires the team to figure out what is the right solution because it is not an external environment challenge. When you think about low-high, where the projects are good, but they are in the countries where the country does not have a great credit rating, of course, this is where private investing can help. And that is where you can discuss a lot more as you get in. Public-private partnership, private investing, of course, it requires the marketing to the multiple stakeholders to get the money. I think the challenge for the world is the bottom lower quadrant where it is low and low, because that is where we have challenges. And this is where international development agencies, like many of my co-panelists are going to talk about, and NGOs, corporations, we can work at a grassroots level to solve the challenges. So maybe that would be a high-level framework. Maybe Philippe, I can pause here and you can build on as you speak more.
Thank you. Beautiful, HP. Joe, how would you launch or frame the discussion?
Thanks for having me and the rest of the panel. I look forward to a good discussion. I guess, maybe just some of the challenges I think historically in this space, maybe a couple thoughts. One, water is competing for resources really like everything else. A lot of the resources and needs of water, though, are unseen. When you travel on a bridge or a road or an airport or other competing urban or non-urban issues, they can be seen. And at times, water issues can't be seen. So competing issues is number one for me in terms of let's get more money into the category of water. You have to have the category of water rise up and be more competitive vis-a-vis other good and worthy investments as well. That's number one. Number two is there's always a political perspective and play here. And a lot of times politics is short term. However, we all know water projects are long term. And when those two things don't match up, that is a challenge. And the third thing I'd say is visibility. There are a lot of needs, a lot of projects. And it's really getting a line of sight and having the projects teed up in the right way, I think it is a challenge. So those would be the three on raising water's profile. Let's match time periods and let's get visibility to projects.
Excellent. Thank you. Catherine, what would be your opening statement?
Philip, I think for me, it's probably in our part of the world, it's probably around disjointed regulation. Uncertainty around regulation is a very big problem. Institutional capacity is a problem in order and how you procure those projects is a problem. And I guess alignment with budgeting processes for water infrastructure. I think in our part of the world, if your budget cycle is 3 years, but the cost of recovery to deliver water infrastructure is 5-year term loan or 7 or 10, there's a mismatch. And so for me, those are the big highlights, and we saw it probably play out in our environment when we had the Cape Town Day Zero issue, if you recall. We had very short-term offtake contracts from the municipality, but the funding required and the payback period was much longer than the duration of the offtake. So it's a number of things, but those the other panelists have mentioned the ones I would agree with.
Thank you, Catherine. Nico, how do you see the situation up till now?
Okay, well, thanks a lot. It's really challenging to come in fifth in the panel because my colleagues have mentioned most of the issues I wanted to touch upon, but I get the pleasure of summarizing some of them. So, as mentioned earlier, there is a wall of money out there ready to be invested in infrastructure projects. And water is a very attractive infrastructure subsector. So what is hindering investment in water is certainly not the lack of funding, but the lack of bankable projects. So the question is why? Why are there not more bankable projects to invest on? Actually, 1 hour ago, I was chatting about this problem with the colleagues at NetBank and said, where are the projects? Where are the projects in Africa? Nico, please help me find them. So one of the issues is, and if it's not done properly, then the project ends up not being bankable. Second, as mentioned earlier, institutional frameworks are important, regulatory frameworks are important, and very often it takes years to fix them and a lot of political will. Thirdly, very often there is an ideological objection to matching public and private capital, right? So many countries are just depending on limited public resources, and this is where the competition effect comes on. Should we spend our limited taxpayer money on schools, water? That's a very difficult question. But why not combine them with private funds, no? Lastly, I would say we are blessed in this sector with the fact that technology is not a problem. We are really, maybe the technology solution providers on this panel will want to kill me, but we are really talking about technology that was essentially around 100 years ago, no? But what we have is a big mismatch between the value of water and the price of water. So, delivering safe water, potable water, good sanitation services, it's expensive. It's a local business, it's expensive. Pipes are expensive. Pipes are expensive. Pumps and electricity. And very often, the biggest users either don't want to pay for it or are unable to. So that's a major challenge.
Thank you, Nico. And Tanzim, you have an even more challenging task as number 5. Anything to add or summarize from your side?
Yes, no, thank you. I think it's a very, very interesting inputs from the panelists. So one key bottleneck, I think, is partnerships, because these kind of projects require all kinds of partnership between the municipality and the central government, the partnership between the government and the donors, if it's a PPP with the private sector, sometimes partnership with the community leaders in terms of awareness raising and so on. So this is a very key area, and how to basically do it in a multi-stakeholder approach and also build trust in the process. I think one important area to catalyze these projects, create these projects so that they can get to the stage where it's of interest to the investors. The second, I think there is a great deal of work that needs to happen in the upstream space. And by that, I mean the regulatory environment, and often is not very favorable for private capital to come in. It's also the capacity of the institutions are in many cases lagging, and also in many cases the municipalities don't have standalone books of accounts, so they are not bankable by themselves, and they are reliant with the central authorities. So this kind of institutional issues is also one of the problems. Valuing water, as Nico mentioned, is very key, is very fundamental to everything. The more we value water, the more we price it properly, the investments start to make sense, and the return of investment start to make sense from private sector point of view.
Thank you. I'm keenly aware of how few minutes that we have together. I'd like to go immediately in our second topic area to the most crucial issue. Nico, you named it first, and I wonder if I could come back to you for a first opening statement before turning then to Joe and Catherine. The question is, how can public and private entities work together most profitably? It's such a difficult range of issues. In your view, where should we focus our efforts to move this forward? Or where are we actually finding examples that you might draw to our attention? And I'll ask then Joe and Catherine the same question next. You raised the PPP's question.
Okay, well, fair enough.
Take it on, Nico.
Fair
just go
enough,
right to the heart of the issue.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Well, I would say the real expert on public partnerships and private partnerships is my colleague from the Water Resources Group. So I'd be curious to hear what he mentions. Yep, the team I work for is called PPP, or Public-Private Partnership Advisory Team. We have a very narrow focus, I'm afraid, right? So we work with government clients on the structuring of PPPs and on how to attract private sector investors to invest in the development of water supply and sanitation projects. So the gap that we are filling, as mentioned earlier by one of the other panelists, is one of capacity of local institutions. It's already difficult to know at national level about PPPs, about finance, about how to market an infrastructure product to an investment, a foreign investor. Imagine how difficult it is to find those sorts of skills at municipal level, because this is where the responsibility of providing water and sanitation often lies. And this is where the importance of having professional third-party advisors such as come into place, or, to be honest, to scale up this delivery mechanism of national programs. I think South Africa has started on a very good footing by setting up its national PPP unit. It has a very clear implementation framework, a lot of training programs. What is missing is a little bit delivery capacity, right? Maybe the central government could do more to help local municipality, especially the medium-sized one and the small-sized one, to roll out those projects. They could do more to standardize templates agreements such as it has been done in the 90s and 2000 in England, for example, with a very successful PFI program, where you could just basically log on a website, download an agreement, fill in a few categories, no negotiation possible or allowed, and there you have a contract to attract investment. So a lot to do. Most of it has to do with capacity and delivery.
Thank you. Joe, you've spoken often of this topic in the past. Where would you focus our attention as we begin solution-oriented?
Yeah, well, I was listening to Nico and just taking some notes here, actually, and thinking about it. I mean, a couple thoughts come to mind for areas of focus. First would be, areas when we talked about it earlier, the value of water does not equal the price of water. The economics are not necessarily reflective of the value that's delivered. So one area to focus is areas where there is a better economic play. So areas around maybe perhaps what the industry calls non-revenue water, where there's a ton of water that's lost in the system. If you couple that with, I would say, a competitive pricing structure, then you're creating, there's value to be had there, and you can focus performance-based contracts, I would say, on top of that. Play where there's economics. I would say try to play bigger. Increase the denominator. Several areas of water are very fragmented. And so it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity to step back and understand what value are we creating here. And a lot of times the value is not just, the water play, but if you just draw some concentric circles around what does water mean to that community and to that local environment, there are second and tertiary effects that you can put economics on, you can put social value on, environmental value on. And so I think the lens that folks look at projects is at times narrow. It's not focused in where you can see a return. And the last point I'd make is the role of the private of P3, it can be finance, but I think it also needs to be perhaps taking advantage of other capabilities like new technology, which can change the game dramatically. We'll maybe get to it later, or perhaps balance sheet that companies bring in, or other areas as well. So that would be where I would focus in on to try to create some momentum.
Good. Let's make sure we do come back to that last point. That one's crucial. Before I call on Catherine, I want to remind the audience that there is a way for you to submit questions, and those will be passed on to me, and we'll be able to ask either the panel as a whole or specific panelists. So I encourage you to use the online forum to submit those questions. Catherine, Nedbank has been one of the leaders in Southern Africa. Can you talk a little bit about where you see the openings for progress? As you have public entities and private, you're muted, so public and private entities working together.
Yeah, so I think that, first of all, I don't think PPPs is the answer for every situation or every problem to solve. There are lower hanging fruits that we can also look at, as opposed to only seeing PPPs as the solution. I personally love PPPs for various reasons. PPPs are there because they have built in, I guess to a large extent, you can't be corrupt in a PPP because there's a lot of transparency involved. What's also great about PPPs is they bring in new technology. Usually that's why they're beneficial for government. And they're delivering a service which government should really be delivering to citizens. And they need to be, the whole ideology, I think Nico spoke about it, or somebody spoke about it earlier, around PPPs being seen as a privatization, sort of alluded to being privatization. There's no way a PPP is a privatization because it's so difficult to manage the asset. Government's always involved, in terms of security, in terms of who you sell it to, even the mechanism of how you arrive at the price, which is not really a commercial deal in the normal sense. But it has so many other benefits. And so from my perspective, I think PPP should be used for specific projects, especially when you're looking at solving a national problem. But there are, and I think you're going to start us on that topic very soon, Philip, there are instances, especially in the private sector, where you can have partnerships and crowd in public sector as well. But private sector is actually providing a solution for water infrastructure delivery.
What's emerging is this question of what are the roles of the private and public when for successful PPPs. Tanzim and HP, I'll let you jump in either order and emphasize the points that you think are most important, and then let's build on what you guys are coming up with.
Yeah, no, thank you, Philip. I think all the co-panelists made some wonderful comments. I felt the PPP has been kind of successful where the national government, the policy stability, there is some certainty about how the process, the execution process is going to work. We have seen success of that in many parts of the world. But like Catherine said, when you go to small, it is not a solution everywhere. And also the comment that also Joe made and Nico made, I think if we want to solve this challenge, you have to figure out different solutions. But I want to make a comment about, I think most of the time the risk is not in technology today. The risk is more about market. There is a market risk or there is a project risk. The market risk comes from the political stability, the process, the transparency of the government. And of course, the project risk comes from the way the project is being handled, being carved out, being defined. That is the risk. I just wanted to throw 2 data points. Of course, there is always a continuous improvement of cost reduction. We are not in the state in the society where there is a true value of water. Still, water is felt like everybody has a right to get it free. So the cost becomes the discussion point. But you think about the progress we have made as a society. Today, it costs 32 US cents to convert 1,000 liters of seawater into potable water using reverse osmosis technology. 32 cents for 1,000 liters. Of course, this is the economy for a gigantic project we have seen in the Middle East in the early part of this year. This economy is not going to hold good when you go to a very small, tiny project in maybe Angola or Kenya. It is not going to work. So that is why it is a very project-specific solution. We need to figure it out. And my last comment on building on Catherine's comment is because we know the payback period for many of these water projects has been long, which has been another barrier to get financing, how we think about decentralized water systems so that the construction period is short, the investment period is short, and the payback period is short, and that would probably open up the financing and private participation very differently.
Definitely, definitely. Tanzim, your analysis from what you've heard, and where would you take us next?
One thing that is critical for PPP is to make the business model work. And often the business models normally do not work because of water is not adequately priced for several issues. But there are creative ways to make the business model work. Just to give an example, if we take a municipal wastewater project and the sewer system itself is a huge sunk cost. But if we structure it in such a way that the private investment is essentially coming to the treatment and the collection side of things and not in the network, suddenly the payback period and return of investment, etc., starts to make sense. That's just to give you one example, but there are many creative ways how to make the business model work and why it's important. Because if we think about PPPs just as a means to get efficiency from the private sector, then you don't really need the private sector to bring in capital, and maybe then that we don't solve the problem of scarce public resources. But if we really want the private sector to bring in capex and do what we call like real PPPs, then the business model has to work, and the incentives and the policy and all kinds of a blended finance can come in to see how to make the business model work.
Let's follow the lead that Tanzim just set. I'll ask anyone to do in whatever order you wish, and let's ask each of you to focus in on a particular example of a successful, innovative financing for urban water projects, which is our primary focus here. So if you could make your general points by pointing us to something that you've been involved in or know of where this has been successful, I think that will bring the conversation further more quickly and give a concreteness to the next 10 minutes of our discussion. Let me just open the floor for whoever would like to begin.
Thank you. Maybe, Philip, I can talk about more than financing. I wanted to talk a little bit about a real example. We have in Egypt, with the local government, to have a decentralized water system. So we have two 20-feet containers, and in two 20-feet containers, they're mobile, and we put it in a place which could serve water to a cluster of villages of 25,000 people. We take the water from the Nile River, and we put it into the container one, and we go through the complete filtration process. And the container number 2 has the quality and the testing, and that feeds water supply to 25,000 villages cluster. We have been working with the Egyptian government. We have done, and we showcased the pilot model number 1, and we have been able to do 15 or 20 of them in last 1 to 2 years. And of course, this is going to be a process where you have to scale up one by one. Hopefully, we see this is a model that we could really be able to take in many parts of Africa, because the construction period is in months, not even years. We talk about 2 to 3 months. It is mobile and it is very low cost, and the ROI is very good. And I think this is one of the examples, or many examples I can talk about. I can pause here for my other panelists to share.
Fantastic. Leave the microphone open and let people jump in with other examples where it takes you, Joe.
Yeah, maybe I can give maybe 1 or 2 examples that we've seen or been involved with. One example I'd say is maybe around meters. So municipalities typically use meters. They deploy meters to measure water, the use of water. They then can price water, and they can also listen for leaks and other things actually in the system. And if we see a lot of municipalities now leveraging, I would say, infrastructure funds who can set up a special purpose vehicle to invest in mostly commercial and industrial meters where there's a ton of water volume happening. That's where, in fact, most municipalities gain a lot of their revenue, maybe 80% of their revenue, from their commercial and industrial customers. Now, when meters aren't working well, they are not getting as much revenue as they could. And typically that is in the favor of, or it's not in the favor of the municipality, I'll say that. But it can be unaffordable to replace all of these meters. And so we've deployed software to identify just the critical few meters that you need to replace with a huge ROI. And we've seen municipalities leverage essentially infrastructure funds, CapEx, to buy these meters and deploy the meters just where the software says you need them to get an incredible return on investment. They take that savings, which is, remember, this is 80% of their revenue now, right? They take that savings, and that's new sources of funds to deploy for infrastructure or other needs. So it's leveraging outside money or CapEx. 2, it's software to identify just what you need to replace, and then executing the project. And the same can be said in solar. Wastewater plants are tremendous energy users. And we've seen wastewater plants essentially, again, leverage infrastructure funds to invest in solar panels to run the wastewater plant on solar energy. It's a green footprint. It's great. No CapEx upfront for the municipality. And given the profile of energy use and energy costs, there's clear savings. There's your economics to essentially share with the investor for the solar panels. And so those are 2 examples of keep it simple business model, keep it simple. But technology, and I'll come back to this, technology is really disrupting, though, I would say, the historical way of attacking problems. Technology is releasing huge amounts of economics, and that's great for the sector moving forward.
Again, I remind the audience to be submitting questions so that when we turn to questions in just a few minutes, we'll be able to direct your questions to the panelists. Again, the microphone is open. You can build on one of the examples that have been shared so far by HP and Joe, or take us in a new direction. Catherine, you unmuted.
Yes, I want to mention 2 things. The one refers to an example that I thought is an admirable example that in our quest as NetBank to see how we can accelerate water infrastructure delivery across the country and to our clients. We did a few road trips, and one of them was to Israel. And I was particularly impressed with how they solved a problem which very much looked like where we are as a country today, in terms of basically ensuring that municipalities still run their own water infrastructure, but they do it through a procurement process with private entities that are responsible for delivering from a technical perspective, but they deliver to an entity that's still wholly owned by the municipality that can reinvest any revenue collected and not reinvested into water infrastructure, into the rest of the services for the Muni. I thought it's great solution at a national level. At a more localized level in South Africa, I think a great example is the opportunities that now exist within regulation, the mine closure regulation, and the requirement for mines when they close to provide sustainable solutions going forward. The land is available for irrigation, for agriculture and irrigation. The water itself that is treated in the mine is available not only for continued services in the mine if it still exists, but also to be utilized in the municipalities around it. And that's been done in the past, but I think the strict regulations now provide even more opportunity. And I think it was, I'm not sure who mentioned it, I apologize, but around combining green energy with green water, and crowding in more investors to invest in the water infrastructure by doing that. So I think there's many learnings that we can take from what's been done before, especially in the energy space, having spearheaded quite a lot of these innovative structures.
Tenzin, you haven't had the chance to share from your work in Vietnam in particular. Would you like to bring some of those examples we've talked about before?
In Vietnam, basically, we are now working with the PPP at the policy space. And one of the issue with Vietnam, particularly that when the government calls PPP and they have declared they have done hundreds of PPPs, but when we see that they are not really PPPs in the sense that where the private sector is bringing in capex, but more like traditional concession arrangement being couched under the PPP umbrella. And this is an also interesting topic elsewhere as well, because we don't really mean the same thing when we say PPP. And for us to give meaningful assistance is to also standardize that, okay, this is the kind of structure that we call PPP, and this is where we want to give our assistance to, because it really helps to solve so-and-so policy considerations. So this is an interesting experience that coming from Vietnam, but also elsewhere as well.
We have a first question in from the audience. Let me pose that to any member of the panel and then ask you again to see, can you take us further in the question? What we're hoping to do in this last part of the discussion is to take the problems that you identified in the outset, the kinds of examples that you and your firms are working with at present, and bring them together in a way that's clear for the audience to be able to follow. That's where you're able to show a direction forward that can have impact for many of the industry leaders that are listening in on this call. One person asks, how can we balance the issue of valuing and pricing water? That discrepancy, three of you have mentioned, but the how-tos of making that work haven't come across yet. Would anyone be able to address that audience member's question?
You know, Philip,
Yeah, I can.
Irony that when you talk about value of many of the products, you think about many of us, we don't even blink our eye to pay $2 to get a bottle of mineral water in a restaurant or in a vending machine. And we could have a reverse osmosis, top-notch quality filtered water produced at home in few cents, less than even 1 cent and 2 cents. So the value of anything depends on multiple factors: situation, impulse, environment, and who the person is. But as you look at the cost and the value of water, I think we talked about, can you take some examples from other industry? I think the solar energy, the renewable energy is a good market to take some examples. And I come from India. You think about, just like water, people expect that's free. Maybe a couple of decades ago, people were expecting electricity to be free. It is like the government should give them free electricity, but there is no electricity. So you want to get it free, but there is no electricity. So what is the value of that? So the value of what is what you're willing to pay because you want it badly. And as you looked at this, which is the solar energy, the next best alternative before solar energy was people to have diesel generator sets to produce electricity. So you have nothing where you are supposed to get it free, but you want to pay some money, you're going to pay the money for a diesel generator set, and 1 kilowatt hour of energy in a diesel generator set could be 30 cents. And now came with renewable energy or solar energy, you can get reliable energy, maybe at 10 cents and 20 cents. So your next best alternative quickly changed, and companies, small entrepreneurs, the PPP partnership, many of them came in and redesigned business models that could provide them electricity at a price point which is not as expensive as diesel genset, but it is not free, and that could really drive it. And I think we should be really thinking about such localized solutions, figuring out where there are pockets of people, what is their affordability, and what is that micro solution that is going to work, because the value of water depends upon a particular community in a particular country, and there is no global value of water that you can attach to.
Tanzim, you're trying to jump in, and then we have questions for Nico and Joe lined up. Tanzim, you wanted to address that one.
Yeah, so there was the high-level panel for water, the UN and the World Bank high-level panel for water, where we had 12 head of states coming together. And many donors, the World Bank, of course, and of Dutch and many others came together to support the process. And one of the priorities, if not the top priority of the high-level panel for water, was actually on water valuation or valuing water initiatives. And now the high-level panel has completed its task, but as part of the follow-up action, in Bangladesh, we have taken up the work on valuing water. And for the first time, anywhere in the world, the valuing water exercise is happening at the national level in Bangladesh right now. The exercise has happened in many places at the basin level, at the sectoral level, but right now we are trying at the national level. And the whole purpose of this is that, because you see, pricing is very politically sensitive. But if we can separate the pricing decision from the valuing decision, whereby establish the value of a water resource depending on its region, its season, its demand, etc., once that value is established, then it's like a separate policy consideration, whether it will be 10% priced or 100% priced. So maybe for marginal farmers, disadvantaged communities, it will be 10% price, so 0% price. But maybe the rich industrialist of the world, they can pay the 100%. So it's a different policy decision at that point, and then whatever is not priced is an implicit subsidy, and the government can promote it as such. But by decoupling the valuing decision from the pricing decision, we are taking the politics out of the process and have the stakeholders to come together and talk. And that what we have felt is like a softer way to move this agenda moving. And when this approach is combined with the awareness raising that water is not a free resource at the community level, plus meaningful tariff reform, this three-pronged approach probably is the best bet or one of the better approaches to push this agenda.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Joe's comments about technology have drawn a number of questions, but there's one in particular for Nico first that I wanted to raise. Somebody asked if Nico could talk a little bit about the context of urban slums or informal settlements, where we have the decentralized water and wastewater financing. How does this work, the wastewater sector in informal settlements? There, people are saying there's a skepticism about how to move forward on those issues.
Well, I agree. So this is where crop subsidies come into play. Clearly, a municipality has the moral and ethical duty to provide public transport option to the slums. The roads are there, they're free, nobody's paying for them for their full cost. And the same should be for water, I'm afraid. When Cape Town was facing the massive drought a couple of years ago, they did so by clearly they managed the emergency by jacking up water prices to manage demand. However, they did so in an intelligent way, right? By increasing the demand in the top brackets while keeping the low consumptions at the subsidized level. Otherwise, clearly there's no ethically, it's not a valid approach, and it's not fair, right? So, so providing services to the low income communities, it remains a big challenge. There, maybe I made a comment about technology. I would say that technology could be adapted. There are cheaper solutions to serve local communities in terms of sanitation and also water supply at community level, which can bring the cost of service down. Whether they can be applied in any country, it's debatable, right? I don't know if a community in South Africa would accept to have a lower level of service than the housing estate in a city center, right? But other countries do it. In Brazil, it's common practice. In Peru, I've seen it applied, with success. Uruguay as well. So it is a possibility to have a different level of services and different technologies applied in different communities.
Thank you. Catherine, a South African listener has asked if you could address this question as well. It's the question of the informal settlements, and especially the wastewater chain. What is the financial model there? Wastewater and water financing in the context of global urban slums, especially in Southern Africa.
Yes, so I think for South Africa, and I think the great thing about, we have an expert in South Africa that we all lovingly respect, called Dr. Anthony Turton, who's always said that you need to have a paradigm shift about water. It's not a scarcity, it's there, it's an infinite resource that you find in wastewater. So I think the industrial solution is one that could help those type of informal settlements, because, as we said, they do have the ability and the profitability to pay as off-takers for water, and then any surplus to provide the same level of service or water to the neighboring settlements, because it's usually in industrial areas, it's surrounding industrial areas. But I agree with Nico that, especially during COVID, it was very clear that where water was extremely important from a sanitation perspective in fighting the pandemic, not everybody has equal access to the resource, and they won't be able to pay, in many instances, not even the minimum amount that is put forward. So I do think infrastructure grants, subsidies, and underpins whatever's required from a national level needs to be provided, and lenders, or both development financial institutions and commercial lenders, know how to structure these funding proposals to accommodate a certain level of subsidy into those transactions that allow indigent people to also have access to clean water.
Yeah, fantastic. I can tell that we're going to have about time for the question to Joe, and then a closing question, which we'd like to pose to all five of you, and that's probably going to run us out of time. Joe, there's been a lot of responses to your comments about the role of technology, ranging from the extremely positive. Somebody asks, what's the business case? Can we make the business case for digitizing the water supply chain around the world, to a number of comments of skepticism about a number of places in the global South where they just think that overly ambitious technology has been part of the problem, not the solution. People would really like to hear you address the two sides of this debate, the experts who are on the line listening.
And I think you can hear me okay?
Perfect, no problems.
Okay, this is the problem with having 5 kids, doing homeschooling, who are all, I guess, going to class maybe for the first time this morning and crashing my internet here at the home site. So
I'm so glad you said that, because hundreds of people around the world are nodding their heads right now when you said that.
Right? Yeah, we're all facing the same pain. It's the same here. They're all over there doing God knows what, but at least I'm back. Look, it's a good question. There have been a lot of technology fails in the past, but that is not the reason to give up hope that we should continue to invest and continue to learn and continue to go. So I wouldn't, back away from mistakes or technologies that have failed in the past. But I can tell you today, there are robust technologies that are definitely proving that they are adding value. As a quick example, we've seen where in a big, say a wastewater conveyance system that might be essentially in a combined sewer situation, sending a lot of polluted water to a river. It pollutes the river. It hurts the community. Kids can't go swimming and fishing, and it just multiple effects, right? Well, to fix that problem was going to cost around $700 million with typical gray thinking. When I say gray, pour a lot of concrete, build a lot of big tunnels, build a lot of capacity, and store the water, and then treat it in the plant later. And if you deploy sensors and software, you can actually leverage, in this case, a huge piece of the conveyance system that was not being overly taxed in a large rain event, and essentially push the flow there as opposed to pushing it into the river, basically saving in this case, the municipality and that community over $500 million of CapEx. They could not afford, definitely could not afford that kind of spend, and they don't need to spend that. So technology is really opening up a lot of new opportunities to actually get after solving some of the problems that we can't get after now because of a lack of funding. Well, we might only need 10% of the funding, not 100% of the funding to actually solve the problem. And we need to learn about what some of these technologies can do and push that they actually work. And I do want to push on that piece. So I think it's exploding in the sector right now, and there's just a ton of possibilities out there.
Thank you, Joe. So we have an impossible task for each of you in less than a minute to address this final question. And Joe has the floor, so I'm just going to give him the first crack and then move next to HP. How can we create effective roundtable discussions where we really close the gap between the governmental goals, say living up to the SDGs, and the private sector's need to have bankable projects? So what's the forum where we can do these discussions that actually make a difference? If you could just say one thing I really want to see happen, this is actually what the Institute for Ecological Civilization does. So one thing I want to see happen that would help us move forward to bringing those two diverse set of interests together. Joe, what's the one thing that you'd want to see?
Well, I think forums like this, WEF is certainly a great forum as well. But what we actually spend a lot of time on is big campaigns. We have a partnership with Manchester City Football Club, but big campaigns to get the issue of water better understood by the general public. And if the issue of water is better understood by the general public and those who serve it, I think that could be an accelerator to solving these problems.
Brilliant. And what a model 30-second answer. HP.
Thank you. No, I think, Joe made a comment about hope. I think hope is the one that we should be catalyzing and bringing in the stakeholders in different pockets. Forums like this, every forum around the world, if we have millions and millions of forums where we keep talking about over a period of time, we'll be reaching the tipping point where solving this governmental gap between SDG and how do we close this challenge together will be the topic of discussion, and that will drive energy, that will drive action. And hope is the one. Hopefully we can solve this challenge one day globally.
Brilliant, HP. Nico, your closing word?
Well, in terms of forums, our organization every year organizes a number of events which are really focused on water. We have a sister institution with the WRG dedicated to partnerships, to fostering dialogue with private sector. So, look, I'm very happy to be working for the World Bank Group because we are an agent of change in this sector. Could we do more? Of course we can, but I think our goals are really aligned with the mission that you just and the objectives that you just discussed.
We do encourage people to check out the website and look at the activities that Nico and others are involved in. Tenzin, your closing comment.
So on bringing people together, that's what 23 WRG does. We are by nature a public-private civil society collaboration. But from our point of view, it's important that we don't do just talk shops, that these are action-oriented. There is a process of conceptualization and prioritization that happens, and from that, it leads to concrete actions on the ground. So we are basically interested to have dialogue that can drive meaningful change. SDGs are very important, and the gaps are so huge. And I think technology is very critical for us to help close this gap.
Brilliant. Catherine, that leaves it to you to give us the last word before I hand back to Ellie.
Yes, so we also, very similar to our colleagues, have different avenues where we come together. We've got a water chamber, we've got the mine water coordinating body. But I think to really solve the problems that we have in South Africa, the initiative that the president started, which is called the SITSA, which is really focused on infrastructure in general, water being one of those. If we had a similar elevation just for water at that level at the ministry's office, where parties came together as we did in this room, but with government added to the mix, I think it will go a long way in solutioning.
Catherine, Joe, HP, Nico, Tenzin, thank you for taking time this morning. It was an absolutely brilliant discussion. Your expertise and your clarity of the sorts of steps that need to be taken came across very effectively to us and to the audience. We wish you the best in your continuing work and look forward to the next time that we have a chance to cross paths. Ellie, take us out.
Thank you all. That was excellent. And thank you to everyone listening in to today's W12 Exchange. What stands out to me is the bright future of water as a mechanism for well-being for people and planet. The key specific themes and takeaways from today are that there is funding available from innovative different private sector entities, but there's also ways for the private sector to be involved beyond just financing, and we need to remember that. We can expand the concept of a return. Water competes for funding with other sectors like education, public health, food security, etc. But water enables all of these and has co-benefits as such. There are green business models that will work with technology and innovation. And there are lessons learned from other sectors, such as energy, that can be applied to the water sector. But conversely, we need to balance the value of water, or what people are willing to pay, with the fact that water is a human right, and therefore the value is effectively everything. There are lots of challenges and lots of things that have failed in the past, but there are technologies, players, financing, and structures that add value, and we can learn from those. The bottom line is that the funding is available, the lessons learned are out there, the technology exists, the need is great, the opportunity potential is tremendous. It's time for hope and action. With that, we're thrilled to continue this conversation at the W12 Drive-In. This is likely to be held on October 22nd, pending final event guidelines from the South African government. This drive-in will set the model of drive-in business events in COVID times and will be a hybrid in-person event and streamed globally. So for updates about this and for all of our other work, please follow along with us at W12 Programs. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and we have a Facebook group, as well as newsletters. So be sure to sign up. Thank you again, and wish you all a lovely day.
Thank you. Thanks, Philip. Thanks, Ellie. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye now.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.